Hey community, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm Dr. Blaire, a doc in clinical psychology, and on this channel we discuss psychology, inspiration, social justice, and all topics in between. First things first, hit that subscribe and bell button. I need to see you back next week. And of course, stay tuned because we're going to start a new series, and I need you to keep watching. Written communication versus verbal communication is vastly different. It even pulls on different areas of your brain. And so lastly, because of all of this, as I mentioned, there is this cathartic release. There is this emotional release that I feel psychologically lighter. I feel emotionally lighter that I've shared these things. I'm sure many of you have said something like, whew, I'm so glad to be able to get this off of my chest. I feel so much better now that I've said in my head. Feel so much at ease when I say this. Now I feel at peace that I've been able to say what I need to say. And if you can relate to that, go ahead and drop it in the comments that you have even said things like that before in your own life experiences. Not to say that it was emotionally dumping again, but these are just concepts for you to think about, and even how we are moving forward in lives. Because as you already know, I believe that as we make changes on ourselves, our communities will make a change, because we all make up the community. We are all community members. Okay, so a cathartic release, an emotional release without building up the skills around emotional expression, without building social consideration skills, without building self-management skills. And this is where it gets dangerous when you are always partaking in emotional dumping. No matter what setting, no matter what age group, whether it's in person or virtual, it doesn't matter in what way it happens. Emotional dumping exists for everyone, and it's something that we all have to watch out for. So I want to get into some simple solutions that you can consider practicing. Solution 1 is for you to ask consent. I'm a huge believer in informed consent. And what I mean is, you have to check and see, is this person's capacity at a level that they can receive the very things that you need to say? So that could look like, hey, I got a lot I need to talk about. I really could use your ear. Do you have any time? Are you all right today? Can you take any of this? Because it's pretty heavy. It's pretty intense. You ask consent. You give information. You give them the opportunity to make the decision for themselves. Their response might be, sure, I have the time. Sure, I have the emotional capacity. Sure, I'd be happy to sit here to talk to you about this. Or it might be, you know what? Can we hold it off until tomorrow? Today is not the best day. I had a rough day myself. Well, consideration. Then 2, you want to make sure that you are sharing necessary details. Sometimes we have a tendency to just overshare because we want to get everything off of our chest, but there is such thing as personal versus what you share with other people. There are some things that are okay to keep private, and I'm not saying to keep things in secrecy. I am saying that you want to be conscientious of how, when you're sharing all details, again going back to how we feel emotionally about something can be temporary. Once you said it, once you put it out there, it's out there. You can't bring it back. And whether you changed your mind, that other person may not have changed their mind about that thing or that person that you are talking about. And so be careful that when you're sharing, that you share only necessary information. And so I always think that it's important to pause and ask yourself that internal question before you share something. Do I need to share this? Why is it important for me to share this? Does it go with the story? Is it related to how I feel about a thing? Or am I sharing details about another person that I don't need to share? All right, 3. I think that it's really important that you start to practice healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries, healthy boundaries, healthy boundaries. There is such thing as unhealthy boundaries. I won't get into that today, but healthy boundaries for anyone. And your healthy boundaries will actually vary. So I won't get into what healthy boundaries looks like, because that's like a whole nother topic of its own. If you think that'll be helpful for us to have a discussion about that, go ahead and drop it in the comments, or shoot me a DM on Instagram, drop it in the comments on one of the posts on Facebook, but let me know somehow, partly because we'll be here for a while. But for practicing healthy boundaries, remember that healthy boundaries they're set up and they're bi-directional, as I've talked about in previous videos. So when you set a boundary for someone else, you are also setting a boundary for yourself to have to follow. And a lot of the time, people think that when you set up boundaries, it's going to be difficult for that other person. I believe that the greatest challenge for a boundary that's being set is for you to have to follow it, and for you to have to be disciplined and follow through on the very thing that you said you were going to do. Now, with a healthy boundary, it may vary. Your boundaries with your spouse versus your friend versus a coworker will look vastly different from one another. So if you want to vent or get some things off of your chest and you are talking to one of these three people, how much you share with each person, the way you go about gaining consent, the way that you even share with them, and to what extent that you share with them will be very different, simply because your boundaries are going to be different with each person. Your role in your relationship is very different from one person to the next. These are just examples. The same would be said for a child who is, in grammar school, who's in kindergarten. What they share with their parents might look different for someone who has a bit more autonomy and independence, who's at the age of 17 getting ready to go off to college. What they share with their parents might look different from the young child, and there's a different level of dependency that's there. And so keep in mind that boundaries move. You put one down, you can bring it up and put down a new one, and the same for that other person. They can set a boundary with you and remove that boundary and put down a new one. Boundaries are pliable. They change. They are not always permanent, although there are times that they can be permanent. Again, not going to get into all of that conversation, but to practice healthy boundaries, remember that they shift depending on the type of relationship or role that you play with that person. Lastly, I would say follow proper online etiquette. Now, of course, this is obviously specific to social media. But y'all, and I know you can all relate to this, we've all seen some things on social media that it's like, why did you post this? Why did you think that this is appropriate? Why did you think that you should share this with everyone who's on your friend list, who, a lot of us have social media friends or followers and or follow people that we don't even know. And so I have seen it. I'm sure you have seen it, but we ourselves can't hold a standard for someone else that we don't follow ourselves. So practice healthy, proper, appropriate social media etiquette. There are actually protocols, and there are organizations that have actually done trainings on this to help people with learning that. And I say people because social media at one point was really new, and how people are using it continue to evolve and shift and change. And now we have our newcomers, Generation Z, and this is actually more so towards Generation A, who's much younger. But at the end of the day, when we are being socialized in life, when we're being introduced to different areas of life, it always requires a level of learning and it having to exchange and actually practice the things that we're learning. So it's appropriate to sit the young ones down, and maybe even some of the grown adults, and say, here's some proper internet etiquette, and here's how it can help you in your future. So you don't put something out there on the internet in which you feel like if you deleted it that it's gone. That's not actually true. It's always in cyberspace, and there's always an opportunity to go back and retrieve the very thing that you posted. So be mindful of what you post, because we're seeing cancel culture, which I did talk about in a previous video, that is very strong. And as much as I believe it has turned into something that's 100% toxic, it is it's real and it exists, and you don't want to end up into a trap because you weren't being thoughtful about what you're putting out on the internet, because it's a permanent record. Essentially, it's a record of something that is attached to your name, your reputation. And remember, how you feel could be temporary and may not be permanent. So be careful out here in these internet streets. Okay, so to sum up everything here, this was a lot, I know, but to sum it all up, emotional dumping, being careful around getting some consent, making sure that we have some informed consent, that we're practicing healthy boundaries, and that those boundaries can vary depending on the person. Emotional dumping is happening between all types of different people and in multiple different spaces, and we want to be considerate on how we may positively and or negatively contribute to this particular thing. And so watch yourself, start to pay attention to things, start to have different types of conversations with folks. And I believe that as you open up the opportunity to have that informed consent with someone before you jump into a thing, that actually may shift it. And remember that when you start to make changes and you're modeling these behaviors for other people, sometimes you don't have to have that direct conversation of you should do this and you should do that, they automatically see it being demonstrated by you. And I believe that most people who are independent, who have a mind of their own, they're able to walk away and say, I kind of like that language that they used, or that was actually really helpful when they asked me that question. I believe I'm going to practice that moving forward. See, we make the changes on ourselves as community members, and the community will shift. My goal is for that to be a positive shift. Amen. Amen. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Share with your community, and be sure to share with someone specific who needs to hear a little bit more about emotional dumping. And remember, before you go, and I see you next time, if I'm great and you're great, then we're a great community.